Same space. Bush beans or pole beans? Which one produces more food? Most gardeners assume one or the other is clearly better. Stacey Murphy pulled together her data on both, and the answer is more surprising than almost anyone expects, and comes with a bonus revelation about what you can grow underneath pole beans that you simply cannot do with bush beans.
So you can see on the pole beans, I'm harvesting every week, so I'm trying to mimic that. So how much harvest can I get each week, that version versus how much if I do succession planting of bush beans. So what happens is the yield per harvest of those different plants per bush bean is smaller, but the yield per plant over the course of the season of the pole bean is higher.
This Q&A was recorded at a past Grow Your Own Vegetables event, where Stacey Murphy compares bush beans and pole beans using real yield data, reveals that both can produce roughly 4.5 to 5 pounds from the same space, and explains why pole beans may still have the advantage by allowing a second crop, such as eggplant, to grow underneath. For more information, free resources, and gentle guidance, you can find us at growyourownvegetables.org. And to grow alongside other gardeners just like you, join our free community at gyov.org.
Another question that I got, and this is from, who is this one from? I think this was from Julie. She was asking, what's the difference in yield between bush beans and pole beans? And so if you have the same amount of space, which one to grow? Which one will you get more of? And this is a really interesting question, and I like to geek out over questions like this, so I appreciate this question. And so these images may be not the same exact size of space, but for those of you who aren't familiar with bush beans versus pole beans, bush beans are what are called a determinate crop, similar to tomatoes that are determinate. They only grow so big and they only grow so many beans before they're done and they won't grow anymore. Versus pole beans, which continue to grow vertically and vine and you can continue to harvest them all season long. And so on the right, you see some pole beans that are starting to grow up a trellis. They're still a little bit small, but they're starting to grow. And on the left, you see a bunch of bush beans. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm not a huge fan of harvesting beans, which is why I don't like to grow them so much. But if I were to look at the yield on these two different things, it's kind of interesting. So let's just take for a moment, and this is not, how do I say? This is from data that I have of bush beans and pole beans, but I've never tried to grow them side by side to see what happens. So this is as best I can tell from my existing data what it might look like. So when you're growing bush beans, the thing about bush beans is you can typically get like 1 or 2 harvests in, and then basically the plant isn't producing enough to keep it around. And I say that as more of a farmer than a gardener. So if I were a gardener and I was trying to get every last bean off the plant, I might keep a bush bean around for 3 weeks because it'll still grow a little bit in that 3rd week. It just won't grow a whole lot of harvest. And so for me, I want to turn it over quicker and get more yield. And so here you can see that the bush beans are along the top. And so let's say in the same amount of space, I have 4 plants where my bush beans are going to grow in. And I have basically these different successions of bush beans. So this is in the same linear amount of feet. I typically am putting my bush beans much closer together than my pole beans. And so what I'm doing is I transplant in the first section, which is those first 4 plants, because I'm trying to get so keep in mind here, I want a continuous harvest of bush beans. I don't want to harvest all at once.
If you have been growing bush beans and wondering why production drops off suddenly, this is why. They are done. Succession plant to keep the harvest coming, or switch to pole beans and let the vine do the work.
All at once. I want to be able to harvest every week. And so what I did with this succession planting is make sure that I had harvest every week. So that's why I'm succession planting and not planting the whole thing out and then planting again. So you can see on the pole beans, I'm harvesting every week. So I'm trying to mimic that. So how much harvest can I get each week? That version versus how much if I do succession planting of bush beans. So what happens is the yield per harvest of those different plants per bush bean is smaller, but the yield per plant over the course of the season of the pole bean is higher. And what was interesting is that the harvest comes out to be about the same, in the 4.5 to 5 range in terms of number of pounds for the same amount of space. So it's kind of, I'm curious to do this exercise in the field to see if this is actually true. This is my guess as to how it would play out based on my experience. And note also that there's a difference in different types of pole beans. So your number of days to maturity of, let's say, a red noodle pole bean, which is a bean that grows really, really long. It grows like a foot long. It's very beautiful, and it's a tropical bean. It takes longer. No, it's a more number of days to maturity, 80 days, versus, let's say, a Kentucky Wonder pole bean, which is 50 days, where you can harvest more weeks. But the interesting thing is that the yield per plant of those two plants is different. There's like a much, the red noodle pole bean is super prolific. I mean, you can't even imagine how many beans comes off of these plants. And so even though you're harvesting less weeks, you're still getting similar numbers of harvest. So that's my best guess, and I hope that helps you think about it. It's an interesting question for all of us to consider whether or not we want to grow pole beans or bush beans. And, you know, the other benefit, of course, of growing pole beans is that they grow vertically, and so you can grow something underneath them. And
if yield per space is equal, pole beans win, because pole beans give you the same yield plus an entire productive layer underneath them. That is 2 crops per the space of 1.
Underneath them. And I personally really like the intercrop of the eggplant and the pole bean. They do really well together, and the pole bean is a legume fixer, and so it does feed the soil some nutrition for those heavy feeders for those eggplants. And so I generally like that combination rather than growing an area of bush beans where I can't really grow anything else in that area.
This is one of Stacey's favorite combinations in the whole garden. The ecology is perfect. The bean fixes the exact nutrient the eggplant needs most. The eggplant uses the space the beans cannot access. Nothing wasted.
Area. All right, I'm going to just double check to see if there's any questions on the Facebook page here for a moment. And I don't see anything over in that area right now. I'm going to jump over to the Q&A, refresh here. Yeah, so Dominique added, Seattle nights generally drop into the 60s in the summer. So in my best estimation, Dominique, I would say that your kale and your cabbage are going to be able to do very well in that particular scenario. I would say that very hot would be in the 90s or, you know, mid 90s, and then your kale and your cabbage is really going to start to slow down. So that's my best guess for you. And I'm curious in Seattle what kind of varieties that people really like to grow there. In Brooklyn, we grow a little bit of everything. We grow the red Russian, we grow the curly kale, and we grow the Tuscan kale, which is the lacinato. And I have noticed that the Tuscan kale does really well regardless of the temperature. And the other two maybe are a little bit more susceptible to the temperature swings, but I might be wrong. It might just be my own preference and my own love for that dinosaur Tuscan kale. So my guess is you should be okay, and take a look at your varieties of your kale and your cabbage as well. And I don't think that there's any kale, collards, and cabbage that say that they're heat resistant, because so many of them can go up to those hot, even though they're cold weather crops and they do well in the cooler temperatures. they do okay in those hotter temperatures as well, just not above 90. That's where they start to get a little bit shaky. Somebody said, I don't know who said this, no name on it, but another plus of pole beans, kids can play under them, makes for a great fort. Yes, it does. And that fort has food growing out of it, which is a big benefit for those kids.
The data says total yield is roughly equal at 4.5 to 5 pounds for the same space, whether you grow bush beans with succession planting or pole beans all season. The difference is not yield. The difference is what you can do with the space. Bush beans sprawl, no undercropping possible. Pole beans climb vertically. The whole space underneath is yours. Grow eggplant below the beans. The beans fix the nitrogen the eggplant needs. 2 complete crops, 1 bed. That is the case for pole beans. You are not the gardener who chooses beans based on habit anymore. You are the one who knows the yield is equal, who plants pole beans and uses the vertical space, who grows eggplant underneath to capture the nitrogen the beans fix, who gets 2 complete crops from 1 bed. If you want to keep learning from Stacey Murphy, there is a whole community of gardeners growing extraordinary food, completely free at growyourownvegetables.org.
This Q&A was recorded at a past Grow Your Own Vegetables event, and what Stacey just shared with you took her years of growing, failing, and figuring out to discover. Now imagine sitting down with 15 experts exactly like her. 15 of the most respected gardeners, herbalists, and soil scientists on the planet, each sharing the single most powerful lesson they know, the insight that changed everything about how they grow food, the thing they wish someone had told them at the beginning. Clinical herbalists who can turn your garden into a medicine cabinet, soil scientists who will change how you see every handful of dirt, food growers who have fed entire communities from a backyard. All of it waiting for you right now, completely free at the Superfood Garden Summit. Go to growyourownvegetables.org/summit, register in 30 seconds, and start watching immediately.